My guest is Sarah Earl, Clinical Team Lead from Resolve Counseling. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you, Donna.
You know, I could have called this, Is It Normal? Because that's really what I want to talk about. It seems that when I get together with my friends, now we're all middle-aged women who, on the surface, don't seem to have any problems at all. And I think this is what it is, the problem, is the ones that tell me that they snap at strangers for walking down the wrong against the arrows in a grocery store, or getting too close, or pulling their mask down, or something. And these are not people who do that. And so, what's going on? Why are they snapping at people?
Wow, that's such an excellent question, Donna, because I think I've heard a variation of that story so many times. And I think one of the things that so I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with clients who have kind of a range of things going on, like all of us do right now. And there are so many things that come from any really significant, fast change in our lives. It doesn't have to be, COVID, which we talk a lot about in society right now, but really anything that's changing. As soon as we have a change that we are hit with, the time it takes us to transition really varies. And it depends on a couple of things. First of all, the pandemic that's going on right now is sort of like this global acute trauma that everybody's experiencing all at once. And when you have a trauma, what we know about trauma is it's cumulative. So it builds on the other things that you've either had happen in your life or have happening right now. So a lot of us, had stuff going on before this.
And this didn't help.
It didn't help, exactly. And so it accumulates. So one of the things we see with cumulative trauma is irritability. That's one of the number one symptoms. Some of the other things we see is like anxiety, depression, a tendency towards grief, or just worrying about just generally what's going to happen next in my life. So yes, your friend snapping probably had, there's probably a ladder of things that was happening right before.
And what I found was I was having all of these classic symptoms of headachy and all the rest. And I realized I was angry.
Yeah.
And apparently there's an uptick in dental work because people crack teeth and
finding their teeth. Yep.
People are. It's not just me. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's what it is. That feels like those times in my life where I've had stuck in a situation that I'm just perpetually angry over.
That's right.
But who can I be angry at? If it was a war, I could be angry at whoever we're fighting with or whatever politician got us into that mess. But it's just out there, and I'm mad at COVID, but there's nothing that I can really direct it at. Is that normal?
So nothing you can, sink your teeth into, so to speak.
Right, yeah. So right.
Exactly. And I think that it's more normal, like you said, even than war. So one of the things that or them feeling that during a war, because one of the things that I do in my job is a lot of helping organizations with understanding, what's going on with people and how do you mitigate the effects of all of this. And when I'm doing that, I'm talking to people about predictability, because one of the things that we deal with really, really well as humans is knowing what's going to come, even if we don't like it. If somebody said to you right now, Donna, you have 6 more months of this compromised, weird way of living, but then you're never going to see another face mask as long as you live, you could be like, okay, I'm going to grit my teeth and bear this until May-ish, and then we're going to be okay. But nobody can tell you that. And it does lead to sort of this like chronic low-level anger feeling, because I think under the anger is a lot of, again, just that feeling of loss and being in that in-between state where we don't know, we know what was before and we don't know what's coming. And it's exhausting.
It is, and that's another one, sleep patterns.
Mm-hmm.
People tell me, and I agree, that the waking up in the middle of the night and reading for a couple of hours, and those are, if this was going on all the time, but it hasn't been. And I think that's, again, that's this normal?
Yeah.
And it seems that, and it sometimes feels good when other people say, I'm doing the same thing, I'm going through the same thing, because then you realize I'm not cracking up.
Or we're all cracking up together, but either way.
Right.
Yep.
And another, maybe once every 2 years, I'd have a day where I just, I'm just kind of, I won't call it depression. I think that's something else. Just a kind of a sadness and kind of a useful, now I can't believe how many in the last 6 months I've had days
Absolutely.
like that. Nothing triggers it. It's just blah.
Absolutely.
Is that normal?
So I think one of the things that happens with sleeping, and it's sort of one of those chicken and egg things because it exacerbates each other, is when we don't sleep, we don't process things as well. Because that's when I always use this metaphor of, thinking about your brain as like, a laundry basket with clean laundry and your brain is the dresser, So that's when your brain puts all the laundry away. So it takes all the information from the day and puts it where it belongs. When there's nowhere that it belongs, like COVID and pandemics don't really make a lot of sense to us, then it stays up at night trying to figure that out. And so usually around, it's like between 2 and 3 in the morning is what I hear people say. That's when their brain's like, okay, we've had enough sleep that we're not completely exhausted. Now let's figure this thing out, right? And there's nothing to figure out. And so one of the things I really encourage people to do with that, Donna, is think about this from a radical acceptance perspective. So this isn't going to change in the immediate future, and we don't have control over that. But what can we control? So we can do things like helping ourselves relax, doing some great exercise, setting up regular contacts with friends, even though that's got some intricacies to it right now. And so instead of focusing so much on what's different and what's normal and whether we're reacting the way we should, I would suggest to you that our brains know exactly what it's doing. and if our brain is waking us up, and if you have the sort of chronic headache, shoulder, neck, and back pain going on, your body's kind of screaming at you that I'm afraid, what are we going to do about this? And so it's really a great idea just to shift your mind away from, hey, what's wrong with me, to what is my body trying to tell me and how can I be different in this moment in time?
And how can we make the best of this?
That's exactly it.
Instead of saying, oh, normally I would have been doing this at this time of year and can't do it this year, what can I do? What do I still have control over?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Watching the World Series. Right, baseball, yay. So, watching that. I treated myself to a couple of other streaming services. So now,
Perfect.
If I feel like in the afternoon, I just feel like kicking back and watching something, I can do that. I give myself permission to do that, which I didn't used to do.
There's a piece of that you just referred to that we call self-compassion, right? So just being in a place where you can say to yourself, if this is what I'm craving, maybe it's time to relax. Maybe it's time to slow down and take a step back. And one of the things I hear from clients is that's been one of the benefits of the pandemic, or one of the gifts that we got that we didn't really understand, was everything sort of slowed down, right? People that were running all over taking their kids to events, half of those events aren't happening, right? And so we've been gifted this opportunity to step back and look at, what did we really prioritize? We've now lived without most of it for 7 months. So what does that mean? And that's also a way of regaining that control.
I think that one of the positives too is I've got a lot more money. I couldn't.
So true.
When I think about what I used to spend on me and girlfriend for lunch, and let's go out for dinner tonight, and then theater tickets, and all those things that I miss.
Yep.
But I also think, this is weird. I the end of the month.
I know.
It was like when I quit smoking. It's like suddenly I've got money. Like what?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look at those positive things, but so it's what most of us are going through is kind of normal.
It's even more than kind of. I think that one thing that kids do really well, and I have 3-year-old twins, so I watch this a lot, is they're very good at having an emotion when the emotion is appropriate, right? They don't do this kind of saving it for later, or this is not appropriate. I'm not suggesting we all kind of melt down in a Thomas and Friends themed bedroom or anything, but but there is something that kids can teach us about that, in that nobody says to them, that emotion is weird, why are you having that? I think that as a culture we need to adapt that a little bit more, and understanding that what our brain's giving us is what it's programmed to give us. There's nothing inherently right, wrong, or pathological about any of this. What's happening, what's exhausting us, is that we're fighting a really natural process and saying, I don't want to feel that way, therefore it should be different. And I think what we find is when we ride the wave of those really difficult emotions, we tend to come out the other side actually feeling a little bit more functional.
And Is it different for different age groups?
I think that the emotional feelings are very similar. Where the emotions come up is different for different age groups. So for teenagers, you know, we're finding the social distancing and wearing a mask at school and not being able to do all the fun sports. That's really difficult. For adults, it's things like going to the theater, going out for dinner, but I think that across the board, we're having very similar feelings about all of those things: frustration, irritation, anger. Lots of people are feeling fatigue, depressive symptoms, anxiety, but it's just maybe over different things over the kind of lifespan. Yeah.
People my age, what I tend to hear is, myself included, this is not how I planned my retirement.
Oh, yeah.
We wanted to travel, we wanted to do a lot of things. I'm glad I did the things I did when I had the opportunity,
Yep.
because now I'm thinking, this isn't how I wanted this to be.
No.
And I don't have control over it, and that bothers me, losing the control.
That's exactly it. Yep.
So in the minute we have left, what are some coping mechanisms that we could all use?
So one of the things that I talk the most about is resilience, and the really like basic definition of resilience is being able to roll with the punches. The nice thing about life is we've all been through stressors before. This is not our first rodeo, it's just the first one that's worldwide, right? And so remembering that you've been through difficult things before. I can tell you for myself, raising twins is one of the hardest things I have ever done, but so far I'm surviving it. And so if we all think back to those really hard things that we got through, thinking about how did we do it then? Because that's very transferable knowledge. So was it meditation? Was it connecting with friends? Was it journaling? Whatever worked in the past, now is not time to recreate or create something new. Now is the time to recreate. It's the time to reach back and say, how have I survived in the past? Can we do this now?
That is such great advice. Thank you so much. I feel so much better now. Phew.
You are quite welcome. Thank you for having me.